For decades, Pyongyang's neat and clean boulevards were too large and hollow for the country that built them. Wide avenues, empty intersections, polished sidewalks, traffic officers standing in the middle of roads where almost nothing was coming. Pyongyang was a city designed less for car traffic and more for the Kim dynasty's socialist image. Roads are built, not for private vehicles, but for military parades, official motorcades, public buses, service trucks, and the occasional black Mercedes that is obviously collectively owned by the people. But recently, something strange has started appearing in Pyongyang. The Juche capital has started to have traffic jams. Yes, traffic jams. Recent foreign visitors began reporting the kingdom's hassle and bustle, which includes the drastic increase of yellow plate private cars. In a country where many people still need permission to travel from one city to another, the capital is now discovering one of modern civilization's greatest achievements: sitting in traffic while quietly judging the parking skills of strangers. You might think it is not a big deal. In most countries, buying a car is a boring adult ritual. You compare prices, argue with the dealer, choose the color, pretend to understand the financing options, and sign a deal. Then you have your little tool for the daily commute. But in North Korea, buying a car begins with a much stranger question. Not "what is your budget?" or "what about the extended warranty?" The first question is, who are you? Are you a senior official, a successful trader, a loyal family with the correct connection? Here, nothing, except your kids and spouse, is supposed to be private. And to own a private automobile is like a certificate. A certificate that says you have money, but more importantly, that the state has decided your money is allowed to appear in public. For decades, North Korean license plates quietly explained the hierarchy of the road. State institutions had their cars. The military had its cars. Diplomats and foreigners had their special plates. But the yellow private plates were a different category. It meant that the state tolerates your private ownership of something bourgeois. But now, the yellow plates are multiplying. Car shops and service centers are popping up in different districts of Pyongyang. Customers can look at sedans, SUVs, even e-bikes, and customized accessories. Chinese brands like Geely fill the streets. Some keep their original identity. Some are rebadged under North Korean names. So, in this episode, we are asking a simple question. How do you buy a car in North Korea? Who is allowed to own one? Where do these cars come from? What does private mean in the socialist paradise? And why does a traffic jam in Pyongyang feel less like freedom and more like a new business model for authoritarianism? Again, before we begin, a sincere thank you to our channel members, whose financial support keeps this channel alive, independent, and able to keep making these very normal investigations into very normal countries doing very normal things. As you see, we have no brand deals and rely entirely on your subscribers to feed to our producer and editor. Thank you. Now, buckle up. Let's dig in.
North Korea's capital is seeing something once rare on its streets: traffic jams. Recent footage and satellite images show a surge of cars in Pyongyang, from crowded boulevards to packed parking lots, as vehicle ownership quietly expands in one of the world's most isolated countries. Social media videos verified by Reuters capture traffic lines and rows of cars with yellow license plates, a sign of private ownership, once nearly unheard of.
Before we dive into North Korean car brands and Pyongyang traffic jams, we have to answer a more basic question. What is a private car in North Korea? The phrase sounds simple. A private car means a car that belongs to a private person. It's not really a philosophical question until you realize we are talking about North Korea. In most countries, private ownership means two things. You own the object, and you decide how to use it. So, a private car is not only a piece of property, but also access to personal freedom. You can drive to work, visit family, take a road trip, go to the beach, get burgled, discover a terrible roadside restaurant, or drive it crazy and burn it like welter white. But in the kingdom, the idea of ownership has to be translated. The DPRK constitution says the means of production belong to the state and cooperative organizations, and it defines private property as things for personal consumption, acquired through work, received as state benefits, or produced from household and other legal economic activities. So, it is about how to define the automobile. Is a car a type of transport infrastructure that is supposed to be owned by the state, like railways, ports, and aviation? Or is it a private object for personal consumption? The 1997 Automobile Transport Law clearly states that automobile transport is a basic sector of transportation and a key link between production and consumption. In a pure planned economy language, the country defined a car as a unit in the national transport machine, which made private ownership almost impossible. It meant that trading companies could have trucks for work. Hotels had MPVs to pick up important guests. Ministries and factories could collectively purchase some vehicles for the benefit of the whole society. State-run agencies owned public vehicles, buses, metros, trolleybuses and taxis to build a mass transit network for ordinary people. But you, as an individual, could not acquire a car for yourself or your household. The 1997 law further stated that institutions, enterprises, and organizations must use cars according to their designated purpose and must not organize unnecessary operations. It meant that you cannot use official vehicles for private purposes, which was a kind of embezzlement. So, for a long time, private cars with yellow plates existed, but were extraordinarily rare. They were the exception that proved the hierarchy. Some were given as rewards to people who had made great contributions to the country, like athletes who won international championships and heads of the nuclear development teams. Otherwise, if you are a repatriated ethnic Korean from China or Japan, your foreign connection might secure you a car in the kingdom. This was the North Korean gap between law and life. The civil code allows private ownership, but cars are not defined as personal property. For years, the practical solution was the classic socialist magic trick, not embezzling the official cars. That's too obvious a crime. But you could pay for the car and let an institution own it on paper. A trader might use it every day, but the registration belonged to a company and had a white license plate to signify its official status. The car was thus private in reality, public in paperwork, and everyone involved could pretend not to notice, which is basically the operating system of late North Korean socialism. Then came the 90s deadly famine. Railways decayed, fuel was scarce, factories stopped. Most North Koreans could only survive by trading, smuggling, and bribing. Suddenly, transportation was a good business. If you had access to a truck, a van, a bus, or even a motorcycle, you had an economic weapon. In the market slang of the time, the wheels made money. State vehicles became private business tools. Military trucks carried market goods. Out of this came the donju, literally masters of money, the new rich who are not supposed to exist, but somehow keep transporting the goods, filling shops, and buying more cars for their business. The existence of this intermediary class was a headache for the ruling Kims. If you confiscate their money and business, the economy will collapse. But if you tolerate their money unofficially, you lose control. The state, therefore, had to find a way to reincorporate these new riches into the socialist system. It gave rise to the 2004 Road Traffic Law. Instead of talking about car ownership in terms of institutions, enterprises, and organizations, it added the term citizens in the legal clauses. That word is tiny, but crucially important. Finally, citizens became possible vehicle holders. Under this act, citizens may first obtain the registration from the state. With the correct paperwork, congratulations, that car is your private possession. You may possess the vehicle and use it however you want within the boundaries of the law, but you are not entitled to the right to sell, lend, rent, modify, or destroy your car. Vehicles could only be sold through government-certified enterprises at prices strictly set by the state. So if you couldn't prove the legal obtainment of the vehicle, the state won't register the car for you. Moreover, auto insurance for privately operated vehicles practically did not exist. There actually was a domestic insurance company, the one and only Korea National Insurance Corporation, which handled industrial, maritime, and fire insurance, alongside compulsory third-party liability insurance for state enterprises and foreign entities operating in the country. But unfortunately, they don't have any policy for individual car owners. If anything bad happens, oh boys, the individual driver was held directly liable. The state might revoke your driver's license, or in the worst-case scenario, confiscate your very private car for compensation. Since there was no insurance payout nor a second-hand market, North Korean black market entrepreneurs still preferred to bribe the officials to register their cars in the name of state institutions, even though they could legally own them.
New type trolley buses running along the streets of the capital Pyongyang are winning popularity of the citizens. The trolley buses reflect the devoted service for the people rendered by the respected Kim Jong-un to provide more convenient traffic conditions.
By the late 2010s, the private car issue had become the elephant in the room, too big for the Kim regime to ignore. The underground market economy helped to create an illicit logistics network for private operators to move market goods across the country. The service car system had become the hidden skeleton of North Korean commerce. The official transport system was slow, unreliable, and allergic to electricity shortages. In contrast, private operators took hours to finish a delivery that might take several days for the state railway. A 2017 report described the system in beautifully depressing detail. A private buyer could register a car under the name of a state enterprise. To do this, the owner paid about 150,000 North Korean won for a working record. Then he paid around 50,000 won every month to the security department for the license. On top of that came more than 300,000 won in bribes, an astronomical price for average North Koreans. So, long before Silicon Valley tech bros charge you monthly for seat ventilation and autopilot, the North Korean auto industry already offered everyone a subscription plan. Enterprise name rental, security fee, assorted bribes, and no customer service, no refunds. Everyone knew what was happening, and everyone was paid not to understand it too clearly. Statistics from the South Korean intelligence agency give us a clue about the reality of North Korean car ownership. In 2015, North Korea reportedly had 278,000 registered vehicles, and the number rose to 285,000 in 2016, then 292,000 in 2017. Of course, it counts vehicles according to the North Korean registration, including all official, commercial, and private cars. Nonetheless, the data indicates the growing trend. In 2024, a satellite study by researchers at the University of Wisconsin estimated North Korea might have between 20,408 and 34,555 smaller passenger vehicles nationwide, or roughly 0.8 to 1.3 cars per 1,000 people. The number was pretty modest by international standards. For instance, South Korea has 420 to 500 cars per 1,000 people, whereas China has roughly 350 per 1,000. But still, the microscopic change does signify a change inside a dictatorship. This growing trend eventually led to the private car reform of 2024. The official name is the Law of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on the Utilization of Private Cars, adopted by the Standing Committee of the Supreme People's Assembly on October 24, 2024. 6 chapters, 43 articles. A whole new legal structure for the dangerous activity of citizens buying sedans and SUVs. The party cadres said the law aimed to establish strict systems and order in the sale, purchase, registration, and use of private cars, while guaranteeing convenience in transport. So it is now stated clearly, the buyer can possess, use, and sell the car according to state regulations. The state protects personal ownership, as well as the right of inheritance. Comrades, stop whatever you're doing, stand up, let's have a round of applause for the Supreme Leader. His Majesty really nailed it. In the world's most equal socialist society, your child may now inherit your second-hand SUV. Under the new law, cars must be sold by state-certified institutions at designated shops. Prices are state-set, and citizens over 18, except active duty soldiers, can buy 1 car per household. However, you'd better understand that the regime changed the law because it wants the rich to spend money, not to become economically independent from the socialist construction. It wants the new money to buy cars from state-approved dealerships, register them under their real names, pay for fuel, road fees, parking fees, repairs, oil changes, and be accountable for their usage of the car. Think about it. Promoting private cars is the kingdom's new driver of economic growth. The new system creates a whole chain of new institutions around the automobile. Driver training schools, notary offices, insurance agencies, gas stations, parking lots, car washes, repair shops, inspection stations, and you name it. A car is not only a car, it is an economic ecosystem with a steering wheel at the center. The most important legal reform is about accountability. Under the old system, many private cars were registered under enterprises, which meant the actual user and the legal holder were separated. If there is any accident or property damage, state enterprises would be held accountable. But now, the liability is back with the actual owner. Further, it helps the traffic enforcement with another layer of revenue and control. Let's be honest with ourselves. Even people in a socialist paradise violate traffic laws, such as speeding, lane violations, and drunk driving. But in the past, due to the lack of proper equipment and an electronic system, the traffic law enforcement was kind of a joke. North Korean driver's licenses feature 5 empty boxes at the bottom. Every time an officer catches a driver violating a traffic law, they use a hole puncher to mark one of the boxes. Once all 5 boxes are punched, the license is permanently revoked. However, without cameras and radar speed guns, how would the officer really know that someone is speeding? Since breathalyzers and blood alcohol testing kits are virtually non-existent, drunk driving is judged subjectively by traffic officers smelling the alcohol. All of these made traffic tickets a highly arbitrary, dirty business. Drivers routinely complain that officers pull them over without cause just to extort bribes. The rampant bribery directly causes a loss of state revenue from traffic ticket fines. With the skyrocketing of private car sales, North Korea can finally have a standardized electronic traffic law enforcement system, and it would generate enormous revenue for the traffic department. Li Chunri, the vice chairman of the China-Asia Economic Development Association, visited Pyongyang in late 2025 and was shocked by Pyongyang's rapid development. The private car sales began in February 2025. By August, in roughly half a year, more than 2,000 new private cars had already been on the streets of Pyongyang. 2,000 sales in half a year seem little, but it was actually a very substantial growth for a closed market with only roughly 30,000 vehicles. It is safe to claim that, in 2025, the North Korean car market had a double-digit growth. The new private car law requires the buyer to hold a driving license. But to get that license, the applicant must finish a 40-day private car driving course, studying both theory and practical driving. After receiving the graduation certificate, the applicant then needs to apply for the license at the local social security organ within 10 days. Naturally, the training is not free. It is paid education, and because the classes are taken during personal time, the process may stretch much longer than 40 calendar days. Moreover, since you have reported yourselves to the security apparatus, the regime closely monitors the usage of the vehicle. The law states that a private car cannot be lent to anyone outside the immediate family. It cannot be used for business, and it cannot provide paid services to others. So, there are no opportunities for you to start a private taxi company while using a private fleet. The authority lets the rich buy personal comfort, not to build another transport network outside state control. Fuel fees, road fees, parking fees, and other charges must be paid on time. Therefore, your private car would contribute to the collective good of society. According to Li's account, the current headache is the shortage of parking lots. The Private Car Utilization Law requires communities to build parking facilities, but Pyongyang was not designed for this. Outside state institutions, the city had very few public parking spaces. Even many new residential districts were built with colorful facades, broad avenues, and ideological confidence, but no underground parking for residents who suddenly become car owners. People now have cars, but nowhere to put them. It's a problem for the future residential developments, and I'm very sure that our supreme leader will solve it with his unparalleled ingenuity. Li further reports that private cars in North Korea currently cost around $13,000 on average, an unimaginable price for commoners. But the new riches still manage to afford them. Due to the high international oil prices, many cars for sale are Chinese EVs, which are good for the environment, but sensitive to electricity outrage. The same electrified revolution happens below the car market as well. Electric bikes are popular in the kingdom now, reportedly selling at around 20,000 units nationwide each year, conveniently diversifying people's transportation options. Road condition is slowly improving. Toll stations now stand at highway entrances. Everything is signaling that North Korea is entering a new era of private transportation with a strictly controlled mobility economy. Now that we have acknowledged the fact that private cars do legally exist in North Korea, but what car can you actually buy? If this were the fake Korea, the answer would be easy. Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, maybe a SsangYong if you're financially unstable. If this were Japan, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and numerous other brands would be for you. North Korea, according to its official doctrine of Juche, should have its own car manufacturers and supply chain networks. And to some extent, the kingdom does have an automobile industry that is capable of building the engine, stamping the body panels, and assembling assorted parts to make a car. The story began at the Sungri automobile factory, Originally known as the Tokchon Motor Factory, one of North Korea's oldest industrial backbones. It was founded in 1950 under the Soviet and Czech support to build up military and transport infrastructure for the Korean War. The factory introduced its first vehicle in 1958, a sturdy, medium-duty cargo vehicle called the Sungri 58. The name Sungri means victory, because in the kingdom, the socialist trucks must defeat the imperialist trucks. It was a very basic model, with a 2-ton payload and a 3.5-litre 6-cylinder petrol engine. The Sungri 58 was primarily used for cargo, but sometimes modified to be a bus. Korean engineers say it is a domestic production, but they won't tell you that it's basically a licensed clone of the Soviet Gaz-51. Here, creativity was strictly limited, meaning almost every vehicle built at Sungri was a reverse-engineered replica of Soviet designs. The factory then hacked the Russian Gaz-69 and introduced the Sungri 415 cross-country 4x4 in April 1961. Number 415 and released in April. Does it ring a bell, comrade? Yes, this model was made to honor the April 15th birthday of the nation's founder, Kim Il-sung, a little honorary bonus for the leader. The factory then produced larger trucks, heavy construction machinery, and military utility vehicles. By the 1980s, official capacity was around 20,000 vehicles a year, though actual independent estimates placed output closer to 6,000 to 7,000 units, regrettably reaching the peak of the DPRK domestic car industry. Moving into the 90s, the production suffered extreme disruptions due to national famine and economic isolation. 1996 was the rock bottom, with a recorded output of just 150 total vehicles for the entire year. The production collapse exposed the obvious weakness of Juche industrialization. It's not easy to build a truck. Thousands of parts must arrive at the right time, at the right quality, and fit together with enough precision that the driver does not die on the way to the potato farm. The propaganda only needs a slogan. This was always the problem with Sungri and the North Korean industrialization at large. The factory supposedly represented a dream of socialist independence. But this dream was born from Soviet designs, Soviet-style planning, and Soviet technical support. Sungri built the kind of vehicles a command economy understands: cargo trucks, dump trucks, and off-road vehicles. They were not vehicles for average household consumers, since North Korea didn't even have a consumer market before the 2000s. But at least it tells us the mentality of the DPRK car industry. The leader only needs to win-win-win in the propaganda, and does not genuinely care about the country's industrial capability and self-reliance. This is why Sungri remained politically important long after its real industrial peak had passed. It's a national symbol of automobile independence. In November 2017, the Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un visited the modernized Sungri motor complex. Back then, North Korea was under intense international sanctions. The country had tested missiles, detonated nuclear devices, and received another round of international punishment. The Trump administration had just returned Pyongyang to the list of state sponsors of terrorism, so the regime desperately needed a picture of resilience and self-reliance. Sungri was the perfect choice. Kim inspected newly produced 5-ton trucks, toured the assembly shop, and finally did the magic trick of driving a truck himself. According to state media, Kim praised the truck's balanced performance, powerful engine, and smooth gear shifting. He declared that hostile sanctions had only strengthened the revolutionary spirit of the workers. It is the North Korean way of development. The outside world tries to strangle us, and somehow, through the genius of the leader and the loyalty of the workers, a 5-ton truck appears. After the visit, Kim ordered the complex to continue the progress and to mass-produce trucks suitable for the new century. Seungri still mattered, but it was not the answer to the new private car boom. The new buyers were not lining up to purchase a 5-ton cargo vehicle with revolutionary suspension. They wanted sedans, SUVs, EVs, ultra-comfort, status, air conditioning, and something that would not make the kids feel like they were being transported to a youth shock brigade. You cannot fill Pyongyang's grand boulevards with military 4x4 and call it modern consumer life. Although, to be fair, North Korea has a track record of calling less convincing things modernity. So, around the end of the 1990s, the country tried something new. Pyonghwa Motors was founded as a joint venture to represent North Korea's dream of having modern passenger cars. It was not a joint venture in the normal sense, not with Toyota or Volkswagen, as China did around that time. Pyonghwa was an eccentric combination of the North Korean Ryonbong General Corp and the South Korean Unification Church. Yes, that cultic, crazy, mass wedding unification church. It was a groundbreaking North and South collaboration, and therefore they named it Pyonghwa, meaning peace. The company used a logo with 2 doves, because nothing says peace quite like a cult assembling cars in a dictatorship. The church side invested $54 million and held 70% of the joint venture. The North Korean side held the remaining 30%. The factory was in Nampo, not far from the Youth Hero Highway connecting the port city to Pyongyang. The factory was inaugurated in 2000 and started rolling cars off the line under names like Hwipparam and Pokkugi. But wait a second, how could 2 companies with zero automobile background begin making passenger cars in a technological desert? Pyonghwa was neither designing cars from scratch nor developing any domestic engine platform. It was basically an ultra-low-cost assembling factory under a North Korean brand. The first model was the Hwipparam, based on the Italian Fiat Siena, as a part of Fiat's 178 World Car Project, a simple sedan designed for emerging markets. Apparently, North Korea was the most emerging market imaginable in the 2000s. These cars were assembled from semi-knocked-down kits. The vehicle does not arrive as a pile of raw steel and engineering ambition. It arrives already partly built. The local factory just does the remaining assembly, installs certain components, checks the car, attaches the badge, and then everyone can call it a local for emotional satisfaction. By 2003, the factory could handle complete knocked-down assembly, meaning the parts arrived in a more disassembled form and had to be assembled locally. The first generation of Hwipparam did not sell in large numbers. In its 4 years of lifespan, the factory only produced, miserably, 500 units. Then they had Pokkugi, meaning cuckoo, based on the Fiat Doblo van. Again, foreign design, local assembly, patriotic name. But even Fiat-based models were way too expensive, and almost nobody could buy them. So Pyonghwa moved toward cheaper Chinese platforms. Through the Unification Church's business connections, the company worked with Chinese manufacturers and produced a range of vehicles, from minivans, pickup trucks, to a rare luxury sedan named Zunma. So, considering the current private car boom, are North Koreans enjoying their Pyonghwa motors? Sadly, no, because the factory was never large enough to match the mass production dream. They initially planned it big, but there were no domestic customers. The production thus remained marginal. The Pyonghwa workforce only had roughly 200 to 350 workers. Though the official capacity was 20,000 cars per year, the actual output was tiny. From 2002 to 2011, Pyongyang produced only 6,368 vehicles in total. Its best year was 2011, with 1,820 vehicles. Then, the dear leader passed away, and around 2012, the Unification Church decided to pull out and hand its 70% stake to North Korea. After that, Pyongyang became less a producer and more a badge. At the 2013 Pyongyang Spring International Trade Fair, it suddenly presented 36 new models, but later all were identified as Chinese-made vehicles rebadged with Pyongyang logos and new names. So yes, the name survived, but Pyongyang never became North Korea's Toyota. As a matter of course, Pyongyang's current private car boom is facilitated not by Pyongyang sedans, but by Chinese brands.
And beyond the volume of cars, what's being highlighted is the colour of the license plates. Unlike the blue and black ones that signal state or military ownership, these ones are yellow, meaning they're privately owned. It's estimated there could now be tens of thousands of privately owned vehicles in North Korea.
So, North Korea's domestic car industry is not really supplying its people. So where are the cars coming from? The short answer is China. The real driving force of the latest North Korean automobile revolution is China's EV boom. On the streets of Pyongyang, recent visitors and social media footage have identified Chang'an, Chery, Geely, Haval, Tank, Hongqi, Li Auto, MG, and many other Chinese brands that you may or may not know. North Korea welcomed Chinese autos not because China is next door and ideologically safe, but because China has recently become the world's most aggressive car exporter. In 2019, China exported about 700,000 cars. By 2024, that number had jumped to around 5.5 million. In 5 years, China overtook Japan, went from being a giant domestic car market to the world's largest car exporter. The cautious side is that, though China is still the largest auto market on Earth, it now faces a problem of overinvestment and overproduction. Every car maker wants to be the next BYD. Every city wanted its own EV part suppliers and assembly lines to drive the local economy. It is an overcrowded battlefield. In 2024, China produced 31.3 million vehicles, and the number jumped to 34.4 million the next year. China can produce cars at a terrifying scale. Brands offer cheap sedans, plug-in hybrids, and electric SUVs, with all parts and the operating system domestically produced. It is so competitive that Chinese automakers entered a brutal price war. Exportation seems to be the only way out. Thus, again, is there any frontier market more frontier than North Korea? Moving cars from China to North Korea is easy. It is the basic border trade, or maybe border smuggling, that people have done for decades. Pyongyang needs cheap vehicles, and those Chinese EVs are remarkably cheap, perhaps even subsidized by the Chinese government. Win-win, isn't it? The timing is perfect. North Korea legalizes private car ownership just as China's auto industry is desperately pushing exports and looking for every possible outlet. Of course, the market is still tiny. North Korea will not rescue China's auto industry. BYD probably loses more cars in a rounding error than Pyongyang can absorb in a year. But for border traders and considering the prospect, the kingdom looks very promising. And that brings us to the most surreal part of the story, the North Korean car dealership. The most famous example is the Amisan Automobile Technology Service Center in Pyongyang's Hwasong district. The name sounds like a repair garage, but it functions more like a superstore, dealing with sales, service, spare parts, and socialist supervision. It sells passenger cars, SUVs, motorcycles, e-bikes, mountain bikes, and all sorts of accessories. Repair service is a must. Oil changes in 15 minutes. Painting, washing, and other maintenance services. Everything in one superstore. You can examine the vehicles on display or browse photos and technical specifications on your smartphone. Just imagine this. Somewhere in Pyongyang, a rich buyer can now stand in front of a screen comparing cars, just like a consumer in Beijing or Seoul, except the final question is not whether the car has good resale value, but whether he can explain his private wealth without ringing an alarm to the party. Some of the top sellers include Geely Preface, Trumpchi GS8, Haval H5, Tank 400, Hongqi H9, and old Toyota Camry and Audi models retired from China. You can choose whatever you like, ranging from $5,000 to $30,000 US for all manner of new and used gasoline and electric models. Then, you can test drive your dream car around the block, pretend to listen to the engine or electric motors, and then ask the salesman whether he can throw in some free floor mats. Young buyers prefer SUVs like the Haval H5. This makes sense. An SUV has more space, is more comfortable, and tells your neighbors about your financial success. Women tend to prefer lower cars with prettier colors, like the Geely EX2, which is probably the closest North Korea has come to lifestyle automotive marketing. The ultra-rich, of course, prefer German badges, because even in the Juche capital, Mercedes, Audi, and BMW are prestigious and emotionally tempting. The only downside, perhaps, is that the car market is not yet very free. A private car can be transferred between direct family members, but cannot be sold to outsiders. The wealth stays in the family, the registration can be updated, and nobody can be a capitalist second-hand car dealer in the socialist paradise. You buy from a state-owned dealership and must sell to a state-owned dealership. There is no exact data about the total Chinese car export to the kingdom, since the 2017 UN sanctions have banned the supply of vehicles to the country. But the custom data shows shipments of new tires for passenger cars rose to nearly 193,000 units in 2025. So presumably, China is at least supplying North Korea with 10,000 vehicles per year. Another weird beneficiary of China's EV boom is North Korea's police department. Pyongyang always had problems with equipping officers with adequate police cars. In the 1980s, when North Korea still had more Soviet support, some police cars were reportedly old Mercedes and Volvos. But those old cars could not last forever. The 90s economic collapse also suffocated the country's police car supply. However, now, with China producing those cheap yet durable autos, modern Pyongyang police cars finally stopped being the leftover ghosts of the Soviet era. Many of the newer traffic police vehicles appear to be Chinese models with North Korean badges. Some resemble the BYD G6, a mid-sized Chinese sedan. Others resemble the BYD F3, the famous Corolla-inspired compact car that was once everywhere in China. Some more expensive-looking police cars look like the Bestune B70, reportedly rebadged in North Korea as the Cholima B70. Again, Chinese hardware, North Korean badge, socialist authority. In the old days, North Korea's traffic police were almost decorative, standing in the middle of enormous intersections, performing discipline in a city with very little traffic. But now, with yellow plates multiplying, the job becomes real. Private cars create actual traffic problems, car crashes, speeding, drunk driving, congestion, and all sorts of troubles that Pyongyang residents are just having a taste of. This is Pyongyang's automotive future. Ironically, China's industrial surplus has indirectly created a North Korean private car boom. North Korea hasn't transformed into a car-friendly country overnight. It became a society where a very small class of people is now allowed to own private cars openly. For ordinary North Koreans, the road still mostly means walking, cycling, riding the trolleybus, squeezing into the Pyongyang metro, or, at best, enjoying a latest e-bike smuggled from China. This is not mass motorization, but a change only for the top 1% elite. Cars still remain a controlled luxury for a market economy that is still not allowed to call itself a market economy. This is a very Kim Jong-un style solution. He cannot get rid of the market, neither could he liberalize it. Instead, the best solution is to build a gate around it, then charge the entrance fee. The future of North Korea's car market will probably be economically sophisticated. There are car smugglers, official dealerships, insurance agencies, toll booths, and traffic police treating private car owners as cash cows. Pyongyang benefits first, because Pyongyang always benefits first. New residential districts may begin to include underground parking. More charging points may appear for the EVs. Shopping centres, hotels, hospitals, and recreational centres would offer direct car access. Police enforcement may become more systematic because road congestion is not just a transport problem, it is an opportunity for discipline and fees. Outside the capital, the story will be slower. Border towns like Sinwiju and Rason would catch up sooner. The remote collective farms would be left alone for decades. In the future, Pyongyang may look more and more like a consumer city. More cars, more traffic lights and car washes. People drive to department stores or to drop kids off at school. Old people would start making new complaints about very ordinary things, like scratches, fuel prices, repair bills, bad drivers, parking spaces, insurance, and whether the neighbour's new SUV is bigger than yours. The old North Korea was disciplined, hollow, theatrical, and evenly poor. Now, new cars on the same boulevards showcase a new North Korea, richer, more unequal, more consumerist, more Chinese supplied, and still carefully watched.